It's like it leader stored in his house.
No, the member's better than that. There was hardly a significant attack in that. It was certainly a political question that was asked and a political answer was given. Question number 2, James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment. Does he stand by his statement in regard to water that, quote, "We need to be sure that any steps we take are fair to all users," end quote?
Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Yes, in the context of the calls for a moratorium on bottled water exports. These amount to 1/1,000,000th of total water use in New Zealand, and it would be unfair to treat them differently to other water users like irrigators, soft drink manufacturers or breweries.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Is it fair that in places like Ashburton, millions of litres of water can be bottled and sold without paying for the water, whilst the locals who rely on local bore water can't safely give it to their babies to drink?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, that is why this government has advanced a program of water reforms, including the setting of minimum flows in areas like Canterbury, where there are now significant red zones, where there is a ban on extraction. The difference is the ban is on extraction for all users and not simply identifying bottled water exporters that use 1/1,000,000th of the amount of water of other users.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Is it fair that the company who bottles water at Otakiri pays only $2,003 a year to access water from which they stand to make $255 million a year?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I note in the figures from Statistics New Zealand that the amount of exported water from New Zealand actually dropped by 1,000,000 litres a year last year, or 10%. So that some of the dreamy ideas about super profits are incorrect. The second thing is the government is simply saying that you need to treat different water users on the same basis, and whether it is a winery, whether it is a dairy farm, or whether it is a factory, that you shouldn't have different rules simply based on some prejudice.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, James Shaw.
Mr Speaker, it's not clear to me that the Minister even addressed the question, let alone answered it, given that he was talking about the way that water gets allocated. I was asking whether it was fair whether the company at Otakiri only pays such a small amount to access that water.
The point the member's making, but I listened very carefully in the answer. I acknowledge there was quite a lot of interjection coming, but in the latter half of the answer, there was no doubt in my mind that the Minister addressed the question that was asked.
You got there in the end.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Given that water bottling, as he insists, may be such a small percentage of water use in this country compared to irrigation, how is it fair to allow a single irrigator take 1,000,000 litres of water a day, leaving Hawke's Bay high and dry?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, irrigation and use by farms is by far the largest user of water, but it is also New Zealand's most successful industry. So I note the Minister of Finance noted the huge growth in wine exports, and that's because we have water. We have large amounts of exports income earned by our meat industry. In fact, 70% of New Zealand's exports rely on water.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Is it fair that the Te Matatini Kapahaka Festival had to buy water for their event from a local bottler because their own water was too risky to drink?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
There is an absolute issue for our local authorities to do better at managing their water supplies. And that is why, on an issue like Havelock North, the member should focus on competent management of engineering services and not simply blame the dairy industry as the member's party has.
Blame it on local government again. Supplementary,
Order.
Mr Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Thank you very much. Is it fair for the Minister for the Environment to belittle the concerns of 16,000 signatories to an environmental petition calling for the protection of water, calling them silly and saying they merely had a bee in their bonnet?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I make no apologies for our government being a party that's going to base its data and its decisions on good information rather than the Green Party that wants to base its policies on things that are so disconnected from the natural world.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that the national government has made such lofty goals as 1. Barely affordable housing by 2020, 2. Rivers that won't make you sick in 23 years' time, 3. Raising the super age in 20 years' time, 4. Being predator-free in 30 years' time, is the government planning to achieve anything before it's voted out this September?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the difference between our side of the House and his is that we are focused on a long-term future plan for New Zealand, and I just invite the member to do a simple thing, like support the government's resource management reforms that will require farmers to fence their streams so that they can be cleaner and houses to be more affordable, rather than some of the stupid ideas like banning water exports and bottled that make such a small difference.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David Parker.
How much of New Zealand's water is pristine mineral water, so pure it can be bottled and sold commercially without treatment? And why does he deliberately conflate that precious, scarce resource with the trillions of litres in polluted rivers or Auckland floods?
Mr Speaker.
Again, there are two questions there. The Minister, the Honourable Dr Nick Smith, can address one or other.
A little bit of basic hydrology for the member is that when you get a big rainstorm, some of that water goes into the aquifer and it's filtered through nature and ends up as pristine water. So for the member to sort of pretend that a major wet event like it has in Auckland at the weekend does not contribute to New Zealand's overall water base is ill-informed.
Order. 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 Question number 3, Andrew Little.